next talk. The title is Taming Social Media for Constructive Climate Crosstalk. Our speaker is Andrew Revkin. He's one of America's most honored and experienced environmental journalists and the founding director of the new initiative on communication and sustainability at Columbia University's Earth Institute. At Columbia, he's building programs, courses, tools, and collaborations, bridging communication gaps between science and society to cut climate risk and boost social and environmental resilience. Revkin has written on climate change for more than 30 years, reporting from the North Pole to the White House, the Amazon rainforest to the Vatican, mostly for the New York Times. He has held positions at National Geographic and Discovery Magazine and won the top awards in science journalism multiple times, along with a Guggenheim Fellowship. Thanks for coming, Andrew, and we're looking forward to your talk.
It's great to be here, and I've broadened it out a little bit. It's not specifically climate, you'll see. I've decided to sort of offer a service. All right, great. So, whether you're a journalist or a data scientist, I think everyone who's on this meeting today is the whole idea, this came across powerfully in several sessions, is how do you make information matter? And I realized after 30 years of journalism alone that if you're not focused on the whole ecosystem, you can really be banging your head against walls for the rest of your life. And the word cool is in my hashtag, can we make reality cool? Because it has to have pull, as many of the social behavioral scientists know, and as you heard earlier, you have to care. It's easy to know what's true or not true, but you have to sort of know your own predispositions, as we talked about with Dan Kahneman. And that's so much of that is not like journalism, right? So I've been on a learning journey. I'm going to really fast forward through the learning journey part and get to the gap I'm trying to fill. And I think it's a gap that exists pretty widely, and it's sort of a novel frontier. Some people may think that's not true, and I'd love to hear from them. So yeah, 30 years of conventional journalism has taken me all around the world, burning forests, the North Pole, the Vatican. And I started out in this very traditional model, unidirectional purveyor, right? We didn't do a lot of our own analysis of information back in the day. We just reported information. And this is 1988 cover story I wrote on global warming. I have it right here still, the one last tattered copy that I own. And you can see we had an infographic back in 1988 showing the changes in California's water circulation in a warming world based on Peter Glick's work. It was really powerful work that's got him a MacArthur grant. And someone recently looked at it, another climate scientist who wasn't aware that people were doing this back then. And, it felt very empowering, and, we were winning awards, and I wrote books and went forward in my journey as a journalist. And it was always complicated. Looking back, it became more complicated. Here, as you can see, we were selling Climate Concern on the front cover and selling cigarettes on the back cover, which says, boy, we're, talking about mixed messages. And think about that in the context of fossil fuel advertising and the like now, it's a strange universe. And those paradoxes became more and more evident to me through time. I came to the New York Times in 1995 and worked there through 2016 in different capacities. But most of it, the first 20 years, 14 years, we're doing conventional, unidirectional purveyor, and sometimes exclusive scooper of information, mostly around climate, but other issues as well. And it felt empowering. But I felt that increasingly issues like climate change, issues like mitigating the pandemic, issues like the infodemic, how do you deal with the information environment we're all immersed in right now? These wicked multidimensional issues became a terrible fit for that conventional unidirectional purveyor model, which artificially distills information as well. The front page of a story in a paper is implicitly brittle. Many of the debates over the New York Times op-ed section in recent years have been because of the brittle nature of those 800-word arguments. And I was kind of fighting that. So I created .earth, a blog in 2007, even while I was still a journalist, a reporter, and iterated it over the years and focused more and more on how do you communicate information. It became interrogatory, and it became a connector more than a purveyor. And that stuck with me, as you'll see. And of course, it felt good. It won a National Academy of Sciences Award for communication innovation around science. And then this happened, the internet, meaning that the social media environment became so polluted and complicated. And I became much more cognizant of the realities that you've heard about over and over again today, which are that there's selection bias, and we're so immersed in. It's like moving from the old model was like we all in the 20th century all sat at the dinner table and had a common comfort food meal. We were all eating macaroni and cheese one night or burgers the next night and watching the nightly news on 3 channels. And then this happened, and so now we're still at a buffet. We're eating comfort food, but everyone gets their own food. It's the world's biggest buffet, and that became dispiriting and complicated. And at the same time, this was happening, meaning the problem wasn't being solved. The whole Watergate model of exposing wrongdoing and having something change just really became clearly inapplicable to these complex, wicked problems like balancing our energy needs with climate concerns on different timescales and with very hard arguments at each end, even among those seeking climate progress, having big arguments. And that you're seeing here, the Keeling curve, which was started, the measurements at a volcano in Hawaii started in 1958 of the atmosphere, showing the concentration of greenhouse gases going up. And that goes back to 1750 using other data. And all the indicators of human impact on the Earth, the Great Acceleration, just Google for that phrase and you'll find a 2015 analysis showing that we've been in Zoom mode essentially until now, at least since the 50s. And that became more and more dispiriting. This picture that I took at the Copenhagen climate talks in 2009 of an exhausted TV journalist really has stuck with me as kind of illustrating that moment we've all had, any of you who've worked on a tough, enduring problem and had to go through that learning curve of this doesn't work and this doesn't work, has had this feeling. And that led me out of full-time journalism. I was blogging for the Times, as you heard, through 2016, went into academia at Pace University. My title, which I made up, was Senior Fellow for Environmental Understanding, trying to reflect this idea of it doesn't help to put out information if you don't know how it's being received or rejected. And I came to Columbia just a year ago to build a new part of the Earth Institute. I'm not at the journalism school. I work creatively with my friends like Mark Hansen at the journalism school, but I'm at the Earth Institute because to me, I don't think we've adequately absorbed, many of you know this, but the world generally doesn't really recognize that there's a new Earth system. It's a system that's capable of changing planetary features and characteristics going forward in time. It's the information system. And so I convinced the new director of the Earth Institute that we need to dig in on that. And my job is not, I'm not a scholar, I'm not a PhD. So it's more of a do lab than a research unit, at least at this point. And we're convening artists and engineers and journalists and scientists and trying to come up with new ways to cut through the noise and engage on tough questions like how much do you value the future, which is a big part of the climate question. And we're getting into high gear, and of course, kaboom, this happened, which has changed everything for everyone. And that took me back to that picture of paralysis and discouragement. But then you started to see right away, like amazing things happening. As you all know, I'm sure, about Johns Hopkins launching their COVID-19 tracking platform. It happened overnight, virtually. 2 scientists in their applied engineering division, as you can see here. One was a doctoral candidate and one of his faculty advisors. They launched this overnight. They saw a very scary tweet from Eric Feigl-Ding, who's very active on Twitter now, saying this is going to be a big bad deal. This is January 22nd or so. And within a day, they started iterating on what was initially a pretty, hollow and limited interface for data, but it exploded into being a multi-billion view vital asset. And that struck me as so encouraging. And there are many other things happening right away, including at Columbia, that were making me encouraged, not just paralyzed by what was going on. So in March, I launched a webcast. That's, it looks like what we're doing now. It's so different though, I think, because it's not presentation. It's really interrogation. It's getting people together with different data sets, different expertise, crossing disciplines. I've had epidemiologists talking with climate scientists because they share the same challenge of polluted information environment. We've just did one recently on the fact that newsrooms are now integrating science into the news process. The New York Times, ProPublica, ProPublica recently commissioned the climate model itself to help shape its coverage of migration in Central America, leading to the United States. And that comes with lots of questions. So it looked great on the website of the New York Times and ProPublica, but I got them together with some scientists at Columbia who were asking some really solid, good questions. And the whole idea is to iterate going forward, to take the kind of convening we're doing right now and make sure we revisit these questions and dig in deeper. Whoops, hold on. So just to give you a quick Monday, and I split it into sections. Mondays are on skill building and tool creation. Wednesdays are policy and practice. Fridays are news and social media issues. And again, many of the questions you're pursuing can be actively pursued and expanded here. Sundays are the arts. And that's a really big part of sustaining anyone's energy, including today. I'm going to just play a tiny clip just to give you a sense of, oh, you know what? I bet I didn't hit the little button for audio. So I'm just going to skip that. You probably can't hear him. So I'd like to sustain this brainstorm, basically. I could have done a deeper dive here into some of the findings and questions that I'm pursuing, and I can do that in the Q&A. One is particularly, I guess I left out the slides. I thought I had it here. There's one that really I'm very focused on right now, which is climate resilience. They're big and they're great geographic data sets for vulnerability growth in areas of implicit fire hazard, but they're not integrated yet with decision-making processes in ways that really can happen. I'm brainstorming with Mark Hansen and others on, can we develop kind of a decision theater approach to taking data on fuel loads in forests, on development patterns, on using artificial intelligence or some other means to take Zillow data and look at patterns of development and anticipate where the worst vulnerability and risk is going to build. So that's the kind of question that I'm trying to pursue and enrich by crossing disciplines and moving forward. That's what we're trying to do. And I'm eager to get your input on next steps. And maybe in a minute, I'll see if I could show that slide because I don't know why I left it out. So that's, let me just stop screen share. I might reshare in a minute. And we know, we're running short of time too. So keeping it quick is good.
We have time for questions. I'll let people write in if they have them.
In the meantime, I will find that slide I wanted to show because it's good.
And I'll ask, are you ready to listen to a question?
Oh, sure.
So one of my concerns about the intersection, I guess I could call it, of academia and research institutes and the press and the media is that a lot of what is done in academia is sometimes not eye-catching. And then sometimes what ends up happening is that in order to get media attention, the PR offices exaggerate, and sometimes the authors themselves exaggerate the findings. And I worry that, and the good part of that is that it gets our results out there. But the bad part of it is that we sometimes overpromise, and I worry that will corrode trust in science. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a big issue. It's a big challenge. It's something I wrote about a lot. And it's not just the institution and the scientist, it's the funder. I've seen the National Science Foundation, 10 years ago, there were a couple of press releases that were overstating a connection between an ecological change and climate change. And it was because they knew the front page thought, meaning the thing that would get my attention, or the Washington Post, was that climate finding, as opposed to the fact that there are many factors leading to the extinction of frogs in Central America or the like. And as soon as you get into the realities of an issue that is complex, the media pull away or they oversimplify. And I think that's an implicit challenge with or without the kind of conversation I'm talking about. I think the more that there's an interaction off deadline, like not just waiting for the press release to come out, the better, the more that happens, the less likely it is that something will get overinterpreted or distilled. It's still, when you put it into the social media environment, of course, it's even worse, because if you're measuring success by clicks, as opposed to engaged problem solving value of something, then that can lead you astray too. So it's really it's a big problem.
No, I'm going to amplify what you just said. This idea of having conversations well before the deadline is a really interesting idea. I've had a very good interaction with a person in the New York Times, Nicholas Kristof. And he and I have talked quite a bit on the phone when he has questions, not right before the deadline. And I found it I've been very impressed on how he understands the issues, and it has kept him from publishing something that was perhaps not quite right, but more scary, right? That it worked out well, and it was because we talked, like you said, before, with time, not right before the deadline.
Right, and one other value, I'm sharing my screen again. I want to make sure you can see it. The headline, consider clashing scientific and societal meanings of collapse when reading Antarctic news. This is where scientists, when they use the word collapse, glaciologists, they're talking about a multi-century process. And this data on the irreversible loss of one of the ice sheets in Antarctica, when you look at the details of the paper, it was saying that sometime 200 years from now, this inevitable collapse will start. And it probably takes 700 years to carry out. But the headlines were all Antarctic glacier collapsing. And that's, again, I think those pitfalls are surmountable with a little bit more steady dialogue, as opposed to.
Yeah, I really like that idea. And I had an opposite experience in a previous work that despite all our efforts to try to explain what actually happened, that the headlines were definitely a sensationalist. This was with Hurricane Maria, estimate of mortality for that.
Yeah. No, I've talked about that particular issue sometimes. And there, by the way, there too, I don't want to go too far astray. I guess this is not astray. This is relevant, because it's like, it gets at that idea of making sure you're canvassing all the disciplines that are relevant to a problem. And paleoclimate work for Puerto Rico shows very clearly that there's a long pattern. There were hurricanes in that region that were powerful and frequent, even in cooler climates. So if the story is torqued toward this is a climate change problem, then you're missing the vulnerability sources that were more directly on the ground, inadequate investment in infrastructure, poverty, all the things that the United States has not done for Puerto Rico. And if it's all about climate change, you're taking the focus of the story actually away from what really is the heart of the story.
Great point. So I have one, we are over, but I do want to ask this last question from Regina Nuso. She says, love this, Andrew. Really exciting Columbia program. What are your thoughts on presenting uncertainty in models evidence? How can uncertainty be placed in context?
Oh my God. I had the pleasure of speaking 3 years ago at a meeting of the Society for Decision Making under Deep Uncertainty. It's deepuncertainty.org. And the reason I was there was because, along with all my other learning on climate and in journalism generally, journalism loathes uncertainty. We don't know how to write about it, and policymakers loathe it. And actually, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 10 years ago were being advised by a professional communication consultant not to use the word uncertainty, because people interpret it as ignorance. And scientists know bounded uncertainty, plus or minus X, is knowledge that gives you decision space. You can, and we do that a lot in our lives, but the idea of shying away from the word, like not using the word as opposed to engaging on the word, is to me deep failure in many arenas. And then, by the way, that's what happened with the EPA under Trump, where Scott Pruitt and others were just throw out that word uncertainty. This is an old practice as a way at hearings and the like to say, we don't know, therefore don't do anything, as opposed to all the information that says that the tail of risk justifies action. And that's a profound challenge right there. I think, one of my big focuses for years has been, how can we do that better?
All right, well, we can keep talking about this. This is very interesting at the open session later.